सोनल खेत्रपाल को सोनल आइए प्लीज. एसोसिएट एडिटर इंडिया टुडे मैगजीन. ओवर टू यू सोनल.
Thanks. So our next panel is on empowerment, women empowerment. Empowerment means many things. But at the heart of it, it is also about the freedom, the choice to dream, to choose your path, the desire to grow, and to tread your own path, even if it means that path has not been taken before. To discuss this, we have a panel of remarkable women with us to discuss how they're empowering women, their lives, and making an impact. I would now like to invite Ms. Pratima Bagri, Minister of State for Urban Administration, Madhya Pradesh. Ma'am, requesting you to please come on stage. Next, we have Ms. Sufia Farooqui, Commissioner, Department of Women and Child Development, MP. Welcome, Sufia. We also have Kadambari Vishwanathan, Assistant Vice President, Vellore Institute of Technology. A phenomenal Odissi dancer is also on the panel with us, Kalyani Fagre. Welcome, Kalyani. And Sarika Sinha, Head for Women's Leadership Wing at Coady Institute at St. Francis Xavier University in Canada. Welcome. So welcome everyone. We have a very big panel and on a very interesting and a relevant topic. Pratima ma'am, I'll start with you. So urban spaces have a very integral role to play in ensuring gender equity, accessibility, and ensuring women's safety. Right? So, what are the initiatives from Madhya Pradesh government, to ensure the city is women-friendly and inclusive for all genders? Over to you.
See, Madhya Pradesh government is working for not only for women's safety, to upbring the women in every field or every matter. For the safety of women, now you could see that everywhere cameras are being installed. They are also not only installed, but AI tool is operating them. So it could be visualized that the dark places where you consider the more incident and accidents to be occurred with the women, they are lightened up with the lights and CCTV facilities given there. Also helpline desk, online services, emergency calls. You could say there is also the location tracing. These are the facilities which government is providing for every woman regarding this safety. So there are a lot measures which are taken, and also the upcoming incidents, whatever so are happening, that are brought up by the girls or the working women, those measures are undertaken by the government.
Can you share those examples?
Like the working women share that they are staying here, single women staying here, but our department is working as they are facing lot problems in household, getting houses like in rental ways.
Correct.
And the location. So our department is building up separate buildings for working women, where they can live, just like you could say that it is the hostel facility.
Working women hostels.
Working women. Also, those buildings are provided with the facilities of child caring centers. There, the facility, because every woman, those who are working, and also are having children, those who are to be taken care of. So every mother is very much caring of their children. And they also face a lot of problems ki where to send our child when we are working in our field or in office. That time who will take care of? So those care centers are not only taking care of those children but also upbringing them. So these are the such facilities which our government and our department is providing to women.
Very interesting. So that was from a policy perspective. Sophia, from now implementing side, can you share, how are these policies that ma'am spoke of are getting translated into practice? What do we see on the ground? So, for example, Pratima ma'am spoke about creches. She spoke about working women hostels, right? So from an infrastructure spaces, what are these, can you share some projects that are already implemented and are going to, and also what are the new ones that we can see?
So adding to what Pratima Madam has just said, apart from the fact that Working Women's Hostel is a part of Government of India policy also,
Yes.
but in MP we already have 3 functional Working Women Hostels, 2 in Indore and 1 in Bhopal. And as is quite obvious, if the government is running Working Women's Hostels, so the kind of rent that is required for the room or the food charges, they're very, very economical. It's like only 1,500 for the room and 3,000 for the meals. So these are very safe campuses. These are not like private accommodations where, entry of people is not restricted. So in Working Women's Hostel, who enters, who exits the hostel is taken care of. So in that sense, there's a parity, fairness in the rates, in the rents. Okay. Then there is very good safety and security on the campuses. And that's not all. We are coming up with another 10 hostels in Madhya Pradesh, Working Women's Hostels in the government sector. Yes, partly to be run by public-private ownership in the sense that their day-to-day operations would be sublet, but the building and the construction would be with government. So this is one thing. Ma'am has also mentioned creches. So again, it is Government of India's clear policy that if the workforce of women has to improve in our country, then we need to have a very gender intentional infrastructure. So there's certain difference between what is called gender inclusive infrastructure and gender intentional. Gender inclusive, if I were to give one example, would be, gender inclusive would be having special buses run for women. But what the government is trying to do is have gender intentional infrastructure. That is probably have a taxi service, bus service, something like the Rapidos or something like that, owned and run by the women. So the idea is to have gender intentional infrastructure which brings about economic empowerment also and not just provide a certain facility. Similarly, our creches which ma'am has mentioned. So for creches, there's already a policy that between 3 to 4 Anganwadis, since I'm heading the Women and Child Development Department, between 3 to 4 Anganwadis, there should be one daycare center. So we are talking about the lowest strata of the society, economically the most challenged strata of society, whose children go to Anganwadis. These women are also working women. It's, like you and I are not just the only working women. Labor women, women who do, odd jobs, street vendors, women who work in our homes, they all are working women. So their children also need proper daycare. One of the challenges when we face with early marriage of girls is that it is very unsafe to leave girl child behind at home when you or I are a slum dweller. Or we live in very vulnerable areas, in rural areas, then it is difficult to leave girl child behind, and therefore there's a tendency to marry off girls very quickly. So all kinds of women need daycare support systems. The government is already working on it. What additionally Government of MP is trying to do is to have creches not just in Anganwadis, but to have a whole range, a portfolio of daycare facilities for the high income group, in public-private partnership, or completely being run by private owners through regulation. The regulation is in the process of being designed by the department presently, and of course have something for the lower income group also through the purely government-run system. So there is, and of course there you have read about MP about some pink licenses, pink auto drivers, pink taxi drivers. So those activities are being already taken care of.
Okay, just before I move on to Sarika, one quick question. How many creches are there in the state right now? And
In absolute numbers, we are trying to create some 100 creches.
Oh, okay.
So, but then that is a very small number.
Yeah,
That would be a very, very inadequate number. And we are only in the process of creating them. So they are yet to be made functional.
And is there a plan? Is there a target that you want these many creches in like
Ideally-
5 years' time?
No, not for 5 years. I would say it should be a longer time frame
I see.
because the numbers are very huge.
Yeah.
There's a need for creche with every Anganwadi, and we already have 97,000 Anganwadis. So having 97,000 creches in the government system is next to impossible because it was come with a lot of infrastructure cost and a lot of additional manpower. So this is a very long-term policy. Will largely depend upon the taxpayers' money also. So we'll only go in smaller numbers, and we'll try and locate them. And we are focusing on absolute commercial areas. Probably, for example, in Misrod, we need more creches so that the labor women who are going to the factories as factory workers can take the child to the factory premises, and somewhere around they should have a creche. But then this is itself a 5-year plan as of now.
Okay. A lot of it would also be covered under CSR because, I mean, it's mandatory under the policy. So we heard a lot about, gender inclusive, gender intentional spaces. Sarika, as you take course on, decolonial leadership in women. So what do you hear? What do women say? How do they look at empowerment?
Thank you, Sonal. I want to begin by talking about empowerment from the standpoint of the most dispossessed women.
Oh, okay.
And when I talk about the dispossessed women, I think some of which Sufia very beautifully highlighted. It's not just women who sit here. It's not women with any kind of class or caste privilege, but women who are rather at the receiving end. So my very intentional understanding of what does a disempowered woman think of empowerment comes from their standpoint. And I spoke a lot with women survivors of violence. And I think Madhya Pradesh was the first state to have a one-stop crisis center. I was one of the founder members, and now it's run by the Women and Child Development Department. So what I went around doing was listening to their voice and theorizing it from their standpoint and their perspective. And there were three things, because we don't have a lot of time. The first was agency. And agency comes a lot from what sort of capabilities we have. What is it that I feel I can do? And what are the larger structures of dominance, whether it's caste or gender or class or my religion, or, the fact that I come from a country which was colonized. What are these facts and how do I build my agency against that perspective? So it's a process of intrinsic transformation. And my major learning was that empowerment is not something that can be done to someone till you yourself realize and choose to undergo a process of transformation. You cannot be empowered. Now the second one was about autonomy. And autonomy had multiple dimensions. So, a lot of us, whether we come from the civil society or whether we come from the state, have focused on economic empowerment of the women. But, to quote what one of a rape survivor told me, was that you cannot use economic empowerment as a sofa, but you have to use it like a springboard. So it's good to have financial empowerment. It's good to be autonomous. But they went much beyond it. They spoke of social networks. They spoke of emotional autonomy, me not being dependent upon the men, the older people in my house for every decision. And one major thing that struck with me, whether it was a sex worker, whether it was a woman who faced domestic violence, was the question of bodily integrity. And my own self-respect being very, very closely linked to my bodily integrity. So, just some of these, and if you look at Amartya Sen, he talks a lot about a lot of these. I'm not going to get into that. So it was a question of being able to make strategic choices in life. And how many of us, despite our class privilege, are actually capable of doing that. The third thing was about power. And the first two are very intrinsic. But the third was not till you start questioning the very doxa, the very hidden social norms that this society, that the religion, that our own castes impose on us, till we start questioning them, we do not feel that we are empowered enough. And this is what came from the women. And I felt that, it was a beautiful process of learning and unlearning as I went ahead with them. And I felt that, these experiential narratives, some of which that I'm sharing with you, that, they very clearly established that unless we challenge the roots of, this very discursive thought called empowerment, we cannot question or structurally transform ourselves. And I'm just going to stop here.
Very interesting. And I mean, privilege means many things and comes in many shapes and forms. So very interesting. Kadambari, as you lead this institute, education is supposed to be like, as what Sarika said, can be a springboard, for many. So how do you see, how education can really empower young women? What is the role that it can play? And also, if there are any initiatives at Vellore Institute of Technology that you are implementing in the institute to encourage more women, because we all know that while we have equal participation of women, in academics, but beyond in the work, it does not translate into workforce. Yeah, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure and privilege to be part of this event. And I think this is the 4th event that we're doing with India Today in Bhopal, and it's always been an exciting one. It's a very nice point you made, ma'am, about it being a springboard. Education is a natural level. It makes the playing field level, be it with race, caste, gender. So education plays an important role in providing equal opportunities. And in VIT, we have always given preference to make sure that the opportunities are available equally to both men and women. That I think is the key thing to equality. That we, of course, positive affirmation, positive discrimination is necessary, but the fact that senior leadership, middle leadership roles are available to women as equally as men is something that we have set forth. In VIT Vellore, which is now like the top-ranked private institution in the country, both our vice-chancellor and the registrar is a woman. So this kind of women being represented in the senior leadership is a very rare sight. And yes, so this is how, as a workforce, how VIT helps. And of course, they were all talking about how working women, the biggest problem is having safe spaces. I mean physical space. Physical space for themselves, physical space for their children if they are in the nurturing ages. So providing that space is something that we are very keen on, as in creche facilities or facilities for women to interact among each other when they are in the workforce. And we have a very vibrant POSH training and POSH redressal system. So these are things as VIT as an organization does, as an employer. And with our students, of course, we attract the best talents throughout the country, and naturally girls. Comparatively, yes, because it is engineering, still there is a disproportionately larger number of boys coming in, but I think it will slowly change. I was very happy to see that the latest IAS graduating batch had 40% women representation. That I think is a slow progress, and we will reach there in quite some time.
Okay. So my next question is to Kalyani. And Kalyani, you are at this very interesting space where, you are a classical dancer, a very traditional form of dance, Odissi dance. And yet you use this as a medium for empowerment and to raise social issues. How does that work? Can you share, your perspective on this, please?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your question. It's a privilege to be part of such an accomplished panel. I would start on a very fundamental level. I work with a lot of young girls. Am I audible? I work with a lot of young girls, teenagers, and I feel, like Sarika ji said, the body becomes a very, very primary instrument to instill confidence in somebody. Because when you train with your body, when you have that agency to actually do something physically with your body, it liberates you like anything else. And from a very young age, if you're working hard on training your body, and not just for the looks or anything so like for vanity, but you're actually doing it for a higher purpose. You're learning values that are eternal through dance, and I feel that gives a lot of body positivity to young girls. Today we are seeing that women are in cinema and everywhere. There's a lot of objectification of women, and there are very unrealistic beauty standards. So when you practice something like an Indian classical dance form, it changes your perspective on how you're inhabiting your body. So I think that is a very important contribution that dance does to your life. In terms of the question that you asked, dance, इसका जो परिवेश था वो मंदिर हुआ करते थे, पर अब के समय में ये प्रोसेनियम स्टेज पर आ गया है. तो पहले जो एक रिचुअल था या एक डिवोशन का तरीका था, नाउ डांस हैज बिकम अ लैंग्वेज टू रियली कन्वे योर ओन फॉर योर ओन एक्सप्रेशन. एंड बहुत सारे सोशल इश्यूज को भी डांस कन्वे कर पाता है, सिंस इट्स अ लैंग्वेज नाउ. सो वी टॉक ऑफ जेंडर, वी टॉक ऑफ वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट, एंड ऑफ कोर्स डांस में बहुत सारे सिम्बोलिज्म्स यूज होते हैं. बहुत सारे जो भी हम कई बार देवी देवताओं की बात करते हैं, पर वो एक्चुअली बहुत रिलीजियस नहीं है, बट दीज आर रियली इनर आर्किटाइप्स दैट वी आर depicting. So there's values, eternal values like strength, there's fearlessness, there's transformation, and like she said, dance could actually be used very, very effectively to actually bring out those values in you. So I think that dance helps with that. Yeah.
Like, very interesting thought process, and I believe dance, sports, martial arts, I mean, these are all ways that you can actually integrate body positivity, like in a very intrinsic way. So, Pratima ma'am, like you're the youngest minister in MP. So, technology पे question बनता है. तो टेक्नोलॉजी को बहुत अब एक गुड गवर्नेंस के लिए यूज़ करा जा रहा है. तो थोड़े कुछ इनिशिएटिव्स आप बताएंगे एमपी में क्या हो रहा है फॉर सेफ्टी, और या इवन विमेन को कैसे पार्टिसिपेशन इन डिसीजन मेकिंग एट सिविल, एट सिटी लेवल, वार्ड लेवल, वो कैसे हो रहा है, थोड़े से आप उस बारे में बात करेंगे.
See, when we are participating, we are talking about women's empowerment, women's participation, what are the problems they are facing, and how they are upbringing them, how they are becoming socially and economically sound, and what are the problems they are facing. Just like the problems are informed by the women's, our government within that time only comes with the things, how can we solve that problems. The placing of camera was also a digital action which was taken by the government, because these are digitally operated, and the lights, also the alert button which is provided now in multiple ways, in multiple areas, in buses, in autos, in your phones yourself, the areas which are black spots, there we have those buttons. Also the emergency calling, emergency numbers, the government, these are the platforms in which the government is providing safety features for the women. They can use them. Also the emergency number which they want to connect with, it is their own friend, their relative, also the government helpline is included in those. So these are the facilities of government in which women are taken care of.
मैम जैसे हेल्पलाइन, इन सब पे बहुत बात होती है कि बहुत इनिशिएटिव्स होते हैं, तो आप थोड़ा सा बताएंगे कि कितने कॉल्स आते हैं हेल्पलाइन पे, या
I have not gone through the data, but definitely I'll go through it. And there are many cases which I have not only heard but also gone through. that women have reported that we have called that number and we got immediate help
Okay.
by that. Also the location tracing, which is the advanced technology. Your own phone has the taxis are now only the taxis are said that they should have navigation system in their taxis, buses, everywhere. Even the school buses have these facilities. So these are the digital platforms in which government is taking action and we are moving forward. Also, the problems will face in near future.
Yeah.
If they'll get reported, we'll sort out that also.
Okay. Sophia, a lot of times, as we speak to a lot of NGOs, not-for-profits, one of the common things that we hear is there are a lot of inherent gender biases in women also, that it's just so difficult to break that it just takes like sometimes more than a year to get women to work or just to get the women out of the house, So can you talk to us about some of the, mindset barriers that, you see that women have or the family members have that actually really restrict this development?
Now that's a very, I would say, a very wide spectrum question. But the main problem that still remains, the biggest challenge to progress of women or their empowerment is a very deep-seated sense of patriarchy.
Patriarchy, okay.
And patriarchy is not for men alone. It's part of our social conditioning.
Exactly.
And it is deep. That's why I said deep-seated, because it is patriarchy and it's patriarchal systems of control. Control is not just, what time you step out of the house and what time you get into it.
Yeah.
It is, as was mentioned by Sarika, inbuilt into our traditions, culture, religion. It has been built into us over centuries. So it is, when we talk of women, say, oh, women are the, culture bearers of our society. Why? Let men bear the culture.
Yeah.
Why women bear the culture?
Yeah.
So all impositions in every community, region, anything, any kind of social discipline or culture, in double quotes, is for women to take care of. And this kind of a conditioning, add to it the genuine responsibilities and very genuine responsibilities of childcare. Men don't bear children.
Yeah.
Women bear children. And naturally, their bodies are weakened when they bear children. So that is again a natural consequence, because they have a weaker body. So women tend to stay with the child.
Yeah.
And then that perpetuates and continues, that the women endlessly stays with the child. Even when the child is 20 years, 25 years, the father is always absent. So that's also part of it. It's irrespective of it, the way our families are, the patriarchy, that the way it's built into it. All of that is the hardest part that, stops women from progressing.
Okay.
So barriers would be, I would say, again, saying what Sarika mentioned, it is for us to decide to challenge our social conditionings, our cultural, religious, moral conditionings that have been imposed on us time and again, for our probably some kind of best interest or biased interest, whatever it is, best or biased interest. But unless we as individuals in our heads and heart start challenging what we've been taught all along, we would never be able to free ourselves. Because nobody else is going to come and free us. It's a mental block. So one is that, and of course, as I said, gender intentional infrastructure, government support systems, and overall change in society is what's going to support. Since you mentioned Women Helpline, if I could just, or the helplines, and ma'am was mentioning it. So ma'am doesn't handle that department. That is my department. I'm so sorry for, jumping onto that question. But, in the last 4-5 years, ever since Women Helpline and Child Helpline also working, because even in Child Helpline, the maximum number of cases come from young girls.
Okay.
So they want to study, they don't want to get married, all kinds of help. So we have about more than 8 lakh cases in both the helplines.
Okay.
Ever since they were formed by the government.
8 lakh.
Yeah. And our lines are continuously jammed. The system is designed by CDAC. CDAC is a very, very, robust networking system. So anybody can call. And that's not all. The helpline makes sure that if you're calling from Bhopal and you need some help, say in Kalimpong or maybe in Sri Ganganagar, they will put the calls there and put you into that connection system through the police system also. Mostly it's through the police thanas or the WCD staff in those offices. And of course, there are predominantly cases of domestic violence also. And there's a follow-up system. Then they forward what was established. The first one-stop center was established by Sarika in the country, and it became a national, model, and was then rolled out by the government across the country. So now we have, in the last 4 or 5 years, one-stop centers in all the 500 plus districts of the country.
500 districts, matlab 500
Across the country.
crisis
so we have
one-stop
yes,
crisis
57.
centers.
We have 57 one-stop centers in Madhya Pradesh.
Okay.
More than the number of districts, because some districts like Bhopal and Indore
Bigger
have a
ones.
higher caseload. So these also, each of these centers in Madhya Pradesh, we have 200 counselors who counsel women.
Okay.
200 legal case workers in these one-stop centers. So there's an extensive digital networking. Everything is available on the phone or on the, on your, like you can call or you can use your chatbots. And of course, then they put you through to the medical, legal and other systems that are required.
Okay, I'll just mention one takeaway. So integrating the culture of questioning, I think will go a long way in, breaking your own biases and also the society. So Sarika, so like you teach women across the globe, right? Women of color, different castes. So what are some of your learnings, that you can share that can really strengthen empowerment efforts in India?
To begin with, I think the way the government has started trying to institutionalize our response to violence is like very, very praiseworthy. And the intention is very clear.
Yeah.
But we all come from, we are all a part of the microcosm of the society. And
Yes.
there is a bit of patriarchy in all of us, each one of us, me too as I speak. And I think what's more important is to keep what Sufia said, this culture of questioning alive, right? And second thing, what I have always hoped and dreamed of is that how does every woman become a one-stop crisis center in herself so that she is empowered enough to respond to a violence, not just a violence on her but on someone else.
Yes.
And violence actually is a very clear, open manifestation. But what happens deep are, many invisible things that have happened before the violence took place. And hence, I keep saying I have a son who's 10-year-old. While we have learned how to raise our girls, we have to learn how to raise our sons. And how do we raise our sons to be respectful to women and to people who don't identify either as men or women, right? Because I keep feeling that, today it comes from the West, that, we've got the queer rights on, but before coloniality happened, before Victorian laws were imposed on us, as a culture, we were very, very acceptable of people who did not identify either as men or women. And, and these are just some of the beginning. And I do want to mention a word which might sound a little academic, but I think a lot of you will relate to it. In order to be empowered, Kimberly Crenshaw, who was one of my professors in London, said, when they enter, we all enter. And let me take that with an example. In this room, in this very privileged August hall, if you think that a disabled labor woman from a very remote area of Madhya Pradesh can have the courage to enter this room and sit, then everyone else here is justified. Yes. So if it's the last person on earth who we can reach out to, then I think we have done all our efforts on empowerment.
Okay, not last person, but Sarika, very quickly, I know in the interest of time, how important it is to get men's participation in this whole feminist movement.
Oh my gosh, that's a really important one. I think that, as a part of the feminist movement, let me first confess that, we have always gone to men with a finger pointing towards them saying, you oppressor. And I think we made a big mistake there, you know. And I totally accept and confess that we have been wrong. I work a lot in a global study circle called What's in the F Word. And it's only with men across the globe. What we have done is gone through a process of developing an inward gaze, because like Sufia said, patriarchy is not just for women. It also teaches men how they should be. And within patriarchy, we have only space for some men, right? Not all men are accepted even within that. So you have that constant struggle to be competitive, to be rational, to be earning. I'm thinking of a brother of mine who is not into productive work, which means he doesn't get a salary. And in our weddings, people just avoid him because they don't know what to ask him. And I think it's extremely, extremely important to get men on board, not in a manner to make them defensive, but the moment they understand how insidious masculinity itself is for them, I think they will come on board on their own. Again, you know, not something that you can do to men, but it's a process of developing an inward gaze.
Kalyani, so social media has played a very integral role in mainstreaming non-traditional, you know, career paths. What is the role, you know, that it has played when it comes to dance as a career?
I think social media has really been a boon for artists, because earlier we saw artists just on the stage and a final piece that they were doing, a finished product. But social media has enabled the audience to become a part of their process.
Right.
So it has really become a bridge between the audience and the artist. And the audience is a very, very crucial part of the performance. Yes. In our philosophy, we say कि जो दर्शक हैं, वो रसिक हैं या वो सहृदय हैं. So the audience in itself is a potential artist. They know as much as the artist does. But we could see कि classical dance में there's a sort of distance from the artist, because the audience now mostly is not so well versed with the grammar of dance or with the philosophy of dance. So I think in that way, social media has really been a blessing for artists. It has made the audience a part of the process and the evolution of artists.
Okay. So my last question, and a very short, quick, crisp one. Kadambari, you know, can you share a story of a student or a program at VIT that really embodies this, you know, the spirit of women empowerment?
Yeah. Before I get back to the question, I just wanted to add to this conversation that we are having about what are the factors that stop women from being in the workforce. The patriarchy part was addressed. And a good amount of thinking among women is that that you have to go to work only if you have money. So if somebody works, it means that the family is unable to provide, the men in the family are unable to provide, or they're going through an economic crisis, so you will have to have money. This thought is even put on me. So that's what I'm trying to say. आपके पास पैसा है, आप क्यों काम करना पड़ेगा? So let alone an upper class women, it even comes to me. You have access, why do you have to go to office every day? This attitude among women should, and very sorry to say, it is mostly, predominantly this thought is in the women. Probably because men are in the workforce, so they understand the perks of a job outside of the financial benefits. So this is something that we have to systematically address. And I have seen this trend getting worse with the advent of social media. Things should actually go down, but it is actually escalating. If you see in STEM education, there is a common misconception that Indian women are all oppressed. But we have the highest percentage of STEM graduates. About 40% of the STEM graduates are women, which is very low when you compare to a country like US, which should be around 25%. A big factor there that they consider is because of the beauty standards that they set, the importance that they give to women being in having a lot of social skills. And all of this gets amplified when you have social media. We see a trend where women are much more interested in going back to the traditional roles envisioned. Probably it's not to the kitchen, but probably it is to the you just manage the wardrobe. You just paint a very good picture of you on the social media. This kind of intrudes in their ability to put a full focus on their education. This is a trend that I'm seeing in very young girls these days. So this is something I wanted to highlight, that as women we must our parents, all of us who are sitting, all of our parents encouraged us into education, that you will have to compete with the men, you have to take a path that is not, that lot of women didn't have. Now, instead of now pushing them back to the kitchens, we are probably trying to push them into dressing rooms. That is something that we need to avoid. In this conversation, I thought I'll add to it. And regarding your question about a student, so it is our Chancellor, Dr. G. Vishwanathan's vision that quality education should be available and accessible to all. He hails from a rural agrarian family, so he always has a sympathetic corner for rural students. So during our 25th anniversary, we launched a program called STARS, Support the Advancement of Rural Students, wherein a topper from a rural government school, a boy and a girl, is provided free education, boarding and lodging. It has been a very successful venture, and we have the program in all the 3 states that we operate, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh. And I'm very glad to note that our STAR students of Madhya Pradesh have been very successful. All of them, we have had 10% placement of all these students, and they come from very poor backgrounds, very underprivileged backgrounds, parents who are not available for them or by medical reasons, or they have deserted them. And one case that really shook all of us was that first time last year, a STAR student got placed in Microsoft with a 51 lakh package. The family would not have thought that they would earn so much, say in like 10 years or in a lifetime. So the girl, I think her name was Shailaja Shengal. She's from Datia, which is again one of the backward districts. So that I always try to say to a lot of students to get inspired from, that you can have your beginning wherever it is. Once you get the right opportunity, it is up to you to take your life and career to a level that you cannot even imagine.
I'll just make one statement. So what Kadambari said, the whole point, like, we, all of us in our career have faced this question कि आप क्यों job करते हो, आपका घर तो ठीक ठाक है. This is actually a national level problem. अगर हम इंडिया का job data देखते हैं पिछले 10-15 साल का aggregate करके, तो जैसे हमारे rural areas, urban areas का जहाँ पे भी income level बढ़ा है, women participation at workforce कम हुआ है. क्योंकि हमेशा नजरिया ये होता है कि a women will work जब तक घर चलाना है. अगर घर में income ठीक ठाक आ रही है, so there's no need to work. But this is the cycle that we need to break out of. And that will be all from here. Thanks a lot. It was a fantastic panel. We learned a lot.